Hello, welcome to my presentation on a field guide to North American cicadas for my master's project. My name is George Keller. There are many reasons why I picked studying cicadas for this master's project. One of the reasons I picked cicadas is because I've always had a great interest in them. When I was very young, one of the big 17-year brood eruptions happened, and I was at a local park with my family, and I was showing a lot of interest in them by watching them, picking them up, feeding the dead ones to the fish and turtles in the pond, as well as watching the birds eat them, and then many other parts of their life cycle like singing, mating, laying eggs, and then seeing the trees afterwards with the flagging and watching that growth come back and seeing the scars on the trees. And that got my interest in entomology started. So I continued with that, looking at many different species, keeping many different insects. And then in college, I met Dr. Kritsky, who is one of the major scientists of cicadas here in Ohio, and well known around the world for his interest in cicadas and bees, and all the great books he's put out, and the Cicada Safari app, which I helped with. I did a lot of recording on there. I helped ID the cicadas on the app and approve and disapprove photos. And then his wife actually told me about iNaturalist, and I started uploading my cicadas and many other insects, birds, bugs onto that, and that helped me continue my work with cicadas and other invertebrates. But the first part of my master's project was on wing venation of the Cassin cicada of the 17-year brood, and that did not work well, and I'll explain later as to why. Alright, so about the project. The project was about creating a field guide for different cicadas around the US. Yeah, the first part of the guide was wing venation, but that turned into the field guide. But this field guide is kind of meant for everyone that is interested in cicadas, people that are new, but I'm going to explain more about that later. So who is the guide for? The guide is for people who are just getting into the world of cicadas. They need a nice starting point, so they need kind of a smaller guide with a few cicadas so that they understand. And it was made for people who've never studied cicadas. This guide is easy to read and understand. And then it's also small, so it's easy to bring on trips. You don't have to bring a whole bunch of large books around. You could just bring one small guide and there you go. You have a nice, easy way to identify a few of the cicadas that are around. Not as many as I would like, but I'll explain that near the end. And then there are lots of nice photos in here as well. Alright, the steps in the project. There were a lot of steps. So first was catching the cicadas, or buying them. Catching them is pretty simple. You go out in the mornings and see if there's any cicadas emerging on trees, or on sheds, fences, posts, and then just gently grab them because hopefully they just freshly emerged, or if they're still nymphs, grab the nymphs, put them into a mesh cage, let them emerge or dry for about 5 or 6 hours, depending on what stage that you find them in. By then they should be able to get their full colors. And then you could take them, put them in a plastic bag, put them in the freezer for overnight. That should kill them. And then you could take them out, pin them, spread them on a spreading board. And then there you go. You have a perfect cicada, no damage. And you're ready to photograph it for the field guide. That's how I collected a lot of my cicadas throughout the years. For the species I didn't have that I wanted to spread out around the US, I had to go to BioQuip. They are great for a lot of different insects, but they have a really good section on cicadas. So I picked up a few specimens from there. They had varying degrees of how good they were. Some were a little bit more damaged than others, but they marked that on their website. And that was kind of all that I had to do, was choose out the specimens that I wanted, choose out the species. Looked at a lot of range maps and everything to make sure it's like I had a good spread. Did I get everything? I couldn't find everything I wanted, but I got a good sample of what I needed for the project. And then for photographing the cicadas, I used my Canon EOS R mirrorless with my 100mm macro lens with a Sunpack DF400U flash. This setup created nice consistent photos that were sharp and clear, and then I put those into Lightroom and Photoshop to edit them, fix the colors, make sure everything looks clear, and make sure that the colors represent the real life insect. Because when editing them from the camera, it could change the colors depending on the settings. So I wanted to make sure that the colors were exactly how they are in real life. So after editing, I found all my research papers, and that was already pretty simple. I pulled some from my previous project that overlapped with this, as well as my books that I have, and any other field guides and papers that I've saved up over the years of studying them. And then I assembled the guide. I already had kind of a mindset of how I wanted the guide to be, because I've worked on, or tried to make field guides in the past that never really ended well. So I was looking at other people's field guides, looking at what I did, and then took a lot of fixing and refixing to make sure it looked well, and then sending it in for edits as well from you guys to see what needed to be done to make it the best it could be. So I did send that in, get the feedback, edit it, and then I did finish the guide once there were no more edits to be done, and I got the all clear to finish the project. So for this slide, here are my drawers with all my cicada specimens, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I chose the specimens. So first, the drawers were bought from BioQuip before they turned just purely into selling bugs. Same with the unit trays. That's why they're a little bit out of shape and wonky, because they're old. I do need some new ones. And then you can see we have two groups of cicadas. On the top ones with the other true bugs are the annual cicadas. And then on the bottom, those are the periodical cicadas. Especially with the periodicals, you can see some aren't spread right. Some are missing wings, or the wings are pinned right underneath the specimen. There are some with really crumpled wings. And then there are those that are perfect, but maybe not quite what I'm looking for. Because a lot of the ones I collected had wing venation issues, and I wanted ones that did not have those issues for the field guide. I needed them to be consistent, which was an issue with one of the specimens from BioQuip. It had a lot of wing venation issues when you look at the field guide, but I did mention that in there, that they do come with issues, and not to, when you're looking for a species, don't pay too much attention to that. And hopefully in the future I could find a specimen with no issues, so that way I can make the field guide consistent. But that is for another slide. So there are 10 species in this guide. Each species has a data card, which you'll see on the next slide, that has descriptions of wing color, wing dimensions, range, time of year, and abundance. All the species that are in my collection, there are 10 photos of them. Each of them are nice and sharp. So here's the example page. So there are 3 species per page. And then it has range, time of year, wing color, wing length, and then abundance. The thing with the wing length and wing width for the front and hind wings is that I measured each and every one of those from the specimens in the photos. So those wing lengths and wing widths and everything would line up with those specimens. So that's a little bit of an interesting fact there. Alright, what was learned first from the first project? First, get enough specimens. I did not have enough specimens for the first project. You need at least 150 for good statistical analysis, and I wasn't even thinking of statistics when I collected those specimens. I didn't even know they were going to become part of a project. I collected those before I even started the project. So that kind of helped lead to the failure of the first project. It was not in the mindset when I was collecting them of, oh yeah, this is going to be a project, I should collect this many, and in this fashion, and with this sort of protocol. I just was collecting them. And then I tried to make it into something which did not work. And then figuring out, the project before collecting the specimens. Being limited to home is also another big problem. I don't have access to a lab. I can't really go to a museum easily. I don't have any super close by. I have to travel quite a ways. So that really limited what I could do. So for the second project, making a field guide is interesting. And I learned a lot from this. It is a form of art, and every person who makes a field guide has their own art style. Like you look at Sibley's bird guides, their art style is different from like the Peterson's bird guides. Or the National Geographic guides are different from some of the other field guides. Some use a lot of photos where some do a lot of art. This could have been done as art and drawings rather than photos, but I am not really good at the art part of it. So making sure I set up the photos and information in a way that is important for the reader, because the way I see entomology in laying out data is different than someone who doesn't even understand the differences between cicadas would see and understand it. So I've got to make it nice and clear and simple for everyone to read, and not just me, but anyone who picks it up should be able to read it and go out in the field and figure out what species they have. And then looking at other field guides and seeing what worked for them, because if people are out there publishing field guides, whatever style worked for them must be there's going to be something there I could pick out and use for my own field guide. And then on the flip side from the first project, using the resources I had at home, because I have a good camera, I have a lot of specimens, I have a lot of resources online I could use to fix up and make a field guide that is good for the project. So for the future of the project, I could look at buying and adding more species to the collection to expand the field guide, because I only have 10 species and there are hundreds out there of cicadas just in the US. Like I was out looking this week for more around my house and local parks. Or I could go in the future of expanding to Canada and South America, because there's a lot of really interesting species there as well. And then using the same format that I have in this paper for those guides, because this format is good, it works well, I like it, and I'm just going to keep using that for any future projects. So one section I didn't really add about was cicada evolution, because when I was looking at the first project with wing venation, there was a lot of really interesting fossils with wing errors that I noticed, but I never really added that in this guide. So I could go back, add a nice section about how cicadas evolved. Here are some of the fossils that have been found around the world. Here are the differences between those ancient prehistoric cicadas and the modern day cicadas. And then as well as like the flora and fauna they are around at those times. And the sorts of that sort of geographic time period they were in. So another part of the paper I realized I never talked much about was habitats. Habitat is very important for cicadas and fuels a lot of the biodiversity of cicadas and the sort of selection pressures that let species live within one habitat or another. And that creates this sphere of cicada species within these different habitats. Like you go into the bottom of a hillside with a little river in there, and you're not going to see a swamp cicada. You're going to see swamp cicadas in the swamps and wetter areas of prairies and marshes. And then you're not going to find a mourning cicada out in the prairies with nothing but grass. So, having photos of different habitats with a list of plants that those habitats have, and then the species of cicadas that would inhabit that. And then getting a physical printout, because some field guides are completely online, but I wanted this to also have a printout as well. And then adding color, because it's white, there's no cover photo to it, and it could just use a little bit more improvement, but that's just the limitations of the software I was using to work and deal with the photos and everything. And I was using Google Docs for all of this, and that has its certain limitations. So making sure I get more colors, printouts, and all of that stuff to make it a proper field guide. So here are my sources, and thank you very much for watching.